So I've been trying to record this video for a while now, and I think I've finally come to terms with the truth. I will never be as good as Naked Jakey, and I need to get over that if I'm ever gonna make another video. We're talking about procedural generation. That's what I'm doing within my video game, procedural generation. I'm going to create the environment using procedural generation. Let's talk about what it is, why a developer would use procedural generation, why a developer might not use procedural generation, and why I'm deciding to use procedural generation within my video game, how I'm doing it, and some other stuff. I don't know, man. When done correctly, procedural generation can turn a video game that has maybe 10 hours of content and transform it into a video game that has conceivably infinite replayability. Minecraft, No Man's Sky, Spelunky, these all use procedural generation. Spelunky, kind of a little bit of random generation, but we'll talk about that. And now, if you still don't know what procedural generation is, the Wikipedia definition is
in computing, procedural generation is a method of creating data algorithmically as opposed to manually, typically through a combination of human-generated assets and algorithms, coupled with computer-generated randomness in processing power, in computer graphics, blah, blah,
blah, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so think of it like this. With math and more math, the computer makes content. If you understand, if you know what noise is, noise looks like the static on TV when you kick it too many times. Perlin noise, which is even more important for procedural generation, it becomes kind of organic and something that we can understand. And then with layers upon layers of noise and more math and rules and blah, 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 it starts to look like something that we can recognize as something that would make sense. I mentioned random generation. Procedural generation is not random. It's pseudo-random. It's a controlled random following rules. There is such a thing as random generation, and Spelunky kind of uses a mixture of both, random and procedural generation. Let's say you're walking from one room to another inside of a video game. Random generation picks from a large archive of pre-made environments. Procedural generation makes the environments on the spot. So why would a developer want to use procedural generation? The easiest answer is replayability, because every time you load up the world, it is completely different. Take Minecraft, for example. You don't know where the diamonds are. You don't know where the villages are. You have to find them every single time you load up a new world. Let's say it's a maze, and you as a developer don't want your players to memorize the maze. If the maze makes itself new every single time, you can't memorize the layout because the layout is different every single time. In Dead Space, I found if I died over and over, I would memorize where the trigger boxes were. I would memorize where the enemies were going to come from, and they began to look like targets rather than actual enemies. I was taken out of the video game. I missed out on the frightening jump scares that took place in Dead Space because of how many times I had to fucking play it. So procedural generation forces the player to master the mechanics of the video game rather than choose a pre-planned route. Now, procedural generation isn't all sunshine and rainbows. You can miss out on a handcraft feel within your game. For instance, in The Last of Us 2, when you go to the museum and you climb up the dinosaur, that can't happen with... That's so unlikely to happen as perfectly as it did with the dialogue that's expected to play. That can't happen in procedural generation. And so maybe if that is what you're looking for in your game, you might want to mix procedural generation with handcrafted environments. Also, procedural generation can get very technical, and if you don't do it right, it can break very easily. But the other problem is, if you want it to be as replayable as it can be, it's going to have to be pretty complicated. And so you're balancing complicated versus stable. I think it's very important for game developers to not opt into procedural generation just because they don't feel like designing a bunch of levels. That's not what it's for. Procedural generation needs to be right for your game. Two important questions that you should ask yourself if you're going to be using procedural generation is, does it fit your story, and what purpose does it serve the player? I'm using procedural generation in my game because I want the player to feel lost and alone, hopefully afraid. I expect the player to have to replay the first level many times, and so I don't want them to be able to memorize the layout. Even when I'm doing testing stuff, I get lost within my own levels because they're brand new to me every single time. It's completely new every time. Now, how am I achieving procedural generation? Am I some smart boy that understands math? No, not at all. Are you kidding me? I'm using a plugin called Dungeon Architect. Within this plugin, there are what are called themes, and this is where you get to decide all the rules that are being put in place, and you connect them up with fucking nodes and wires, and it's awesome, and I love how it's set up. It's fucking great. Along with the rules, it's also the atmosphere, how it looks, what assets are you using to make the walls and the floors and stuff. Oh, and don't worry, I've been working on the game. It's a bunch of small little housekeeping things. So we have some doors that squeak when they move, and you get to move them with the camera, and you can slam the doors or close them really quietly, and I want that to play a role in the stealth. I want the enemies to be able to hear the doors, and that's what I'm working on right now. I finally figured out the enemy ragdolls. I was having an issue with importing new skeletons and making the ragdolls work, but I finally got that to work, so now when they die, they can ragdoll and you can kick them around. Ragdolls are very important to me as a player, and so it has to be added in my video game. So that's exciting. Also, there are finally level transitions. Again, small stuff, but very important stuff. It has to happen. So when you reach the end of the level, the next level will load, and that's, it's needed. Small stuff, but very important stuff. So, we talked about procedural generation, what it is, when to use it, when not to use it, why I'm using it, and I want to thank you for making it this far within the video. That's so fucking cool of you. Oh my god. Also, I want to talk about, I've been going live on YouTube Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 6 p.m. Central Daylight Time, and what we're doing, we're making this creature right here. I think I'm gonna be putting the creature right here. Something like that, right there. Yeah, okay, so I'm making it all live on YouTube, every part of the creation. Right now we're sculpting it, and then the next part we're gonna have to texture it, and then we're gonna have to retopologize it and bake it, and then rig it, and then animate it, and then finally put it all into Unreal. And I'm going to be doing all of that live on YouTube, so if you want to check that out, I hope to see you there. I also want to thank everyone on my Patreon for supporting me in this video game. You have no idea how much it helps me out. So recently, my patrons voted on how much of an importance building will be within the game, and they said it's going to be very important. And so I'm going to have to make that work somehow, and it's in place. We're going to do it. It's going to be great. I'm excited. So I want to thank all of you for participating in that poll. I think that's everything. So I hope you have a great week. I'll see you soon.